Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first ever Diversity Council series, Perspectives. I'm Camille Hunter, lead of our Culture and Inclusion Task Force, and we are so excited that you decided to tune in today. Today, we are going to be hearing from each thread that makes up our IG family, our consultants, our clients, and our internals on what it means to be Black in the workplace. What does that mean in 2020 and beyond, and how do we continue to challenge our mindsets and evolve? Last year, we had a really important conversation together internally after the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. And on that call, we lived out our shared values. We listened to each other, we empathized with one another, and we just learned. So as we close out Black History Month, we hope that this conversation today brings about the same changes of perceptions and perspectives. We are so excited that you decided to tune in. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over. Enjoy.
Hello, and welcome to Perspectives, where we look to educate each other on the different culture perspectives of the people around us through dialogue. I'm your host, Ben Roberts. Today, we are talking about Black History Month. Our panelists are Ronald Skeet, Director, Jakelvin Laughinghouse, Delivery Manager, Marquise Whiteside, a Resource Manager, Anna McBride, Coworker Technology Manager, Winter Batiste, Professional Recruiter, Tyan Smith, Recruiter, and Mark Clark, a Team Manager. How's everybody doing? It's good to see you guys.
Good to see you guys, man.
Well, let's jump right in. Let's jump right in. Ronald, I have a question for you, sir. I'd like to know, in what ways does being Black affect your day-to-day work life? And how is it different from, say, some of your other coworkers?
Okay. Thanks for that, Ben, and thanks for Inside Global for having me here. I would say it's different in three ways. I always say, I have a sense of purpose, a sense of pride, and then sometimes a little bit of pain. So, purpose in the fact that I get the chance to be my best, but also to show the world and colleagues the reality of the Black experience and who we truly are. A sense of pride because I get a chance to break stereotypes every day, just showing, the full depth and breadth of the Black experience and who we are in the workplace from, the front door to the boardroom, what we are capable of in terms of excellence. A little pain because, sometimes it can be a little weighty. Sometimes when you're the only one in the room sometimes and, you feel like a guest in somebody else's house and then, you know, whether you are a person of color, whether you're a woman, whether you're in the LGBTQ community, again, when you feel like a guest in somebody else's house, it's a different experience. You can't be your full self. You don't want to make a mistake because then you won't get invited back. So that's the piece that is a little bit weighty about the day-to-day experience as a Black person in the workforce.
That's interesting you say that too. I understand that feeling of, hey, somebody else might mess it up for you just because you guys happen to have the same skin color.
Yeah.
Is that a similar experience to what you've had, Marquise?
Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought that up. So first of all, thanks for having me on, Ben. I appreciate being on this call. But sort of to what you were saying, Ron, two things come to mind for me: code switching and expectations. So when you are in the workplace, you feel like, especially if you're the only token Black, Hispanic, or whatever person, there's kind of this expectation that you have to perform at a higher level because you have this thing in the back of your mind. Did I get hired because of a diversity quota, or am I hired because of my actual tangible skills and my resume? And that's something I think that swirls around in most people when you're the only person in the workplace. And so that's an experience that I come to work with on the day to day, even when it's unintentional. And then the other thing is code switching. One thing that I know, I can be different with calls like people I'm on this panel with right now versus colleagues at the work. Sometimes it's unintentional, but sometimes you don't want to come off offensive. You don't want to come off aggressive. So you tend to change your demeanor or change your perspective while you're at work. And so being Black in a workplace, typically for me, it falls within those expectations as well as that code switching.
That's interesting. I'd never actually heard that term, code switching. That's very interesting. What about you, Winter? What are your experiences been like?
Yeah, I was going to say code switching. Thank you, Ben, and everyone for having me on the call first. But yes, code switching is a newer term that I've also heard and really resonate with. And to me, code switching is just kind of where, like Ski or said earlier, you go into someone's house, you are that guest, and while you're there, you're one way. You may speak in a certain demeanor, and you're always kind of just constantly aware. You don't want to like offend anybody. I'm going to come with my best manners forward. I'm going to say all the right things. I never want to, offend anybody. Versus when I'm around, say on my Black employee happy hour, I really feel like I can just take off that mask and be myself. Just being Black at work is just this constant awareness, like you are that guest at every single meeting, whether it's intentional or not, you always kind of feel in that zone of where I always need to be on my P's and Q's. I don't want to offend anybody. Me personally, something that I feel like being a Black woman in the office it can be a little bit exhausting, more so than my other colleagues, because you're constantly trying to put on this face of like happiness. You want to be the one smiling. You never want to be upset. I've even had instances where somebody may pull me aside on a normal day and say, what's wrong? Why aren't you smiling? Like, why aren't you happy? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm just, I'm just me. Why me specifically? Like, so you're just kind of constantly reminded and aware if you aren't, being on your best manners as a guest in the house, per se, kind of like always kind of brought out, and it's kind of exhausting, always having to be aware all the time. Like, yeah, you're the one that's standing out, so.
And that's an interesting perspective that you bring into it there, because this question's for you, Anna. How do you combat the stereotypes of Black women in the workplace on a day-to-day basis?
Oh, well, we can't combat, we can't fight, to Winter's point. We can't push back on the stereotypes. We just have to be, conscious to the fact that it does happen, covertly, and then just address it in our interactions and how we engage. To Winter's point, even on my day-to-day, if I go through a cycle of meetings all day around 4 or 5, I just want to be able to use a slang term, or to just be able to just breathe a little bit. I feel the pressure constantly because, as a lot of you probably on this call, you guys probably go through where your day working from home, if you guys aren't on site or at location, is back to back to back meetings. And we are the only ones in those actual meetings. So for me personally, I get a double whammy of, impression management, where I'm on the calls, and not only do I have to, and not to say, there's not a way of speaking proper business and professional language. However, as we know, we also have our own standards of professional and business language. And to sometimes when we're having certain conversations to the masses, there is a general business term that we may use, but just because the majority of the people on the call aren't like us, they may not use it in that same vernacular. They may not use it in the same context or statement. So I find myself approaching even the minor conversation or the minor statements with a double level of, I would say anxiety at times, making sure that who I'm communicating to in my field is actually IT operations. So I have to make sure I'm 100% accurate with how I'm expressing myself technically, which varies. Some people say PC, some people say workstation, some people say, like, just imagine trying to pick a word out of a box when we all know that the words that we use are culturally influenced. So then tailoring that conversation to just actually be what they, what the majority, not, to say they, but the majority of the people on the call actually use. So I find myself aggressively code switching to your question, Ben, and I find myself being conscious in every single interaction to make sure that I'm getting it right, because even within my position of middle management, I feel the additional pressure to make sure that my brand, make sure that my impression is set. And, by the end of the day, I'm usually spent every other day, just simply, and a lot of times I question myself, would this be different if I, if the majority of the people that worked where I worked was like me, maybe a bunch of women or maybe a bunch of men, Black men, or, Black people or minorities, so there's a lot of things that just pass through my mind with how I interact on the daily, but it's really just because of my particular field. There aren't a lot of women, and if they are Blacks, they are from a military background. There's a lot of different factors that play into that.
That's a very good point, and I kind of want to get a slightly different perspective. Mark, you've I'm not going to say you've been around a while. Let's say you're well seasoned when it comes to workplaces.
That's much better, Ben. I appreciate that.
You're well seasoned, my friend. Let's has that. Have you noticed that change over the years? Has that concept of your Blackness causing you to have a different work life change over the years, and maybe to Anna's point, change with given your environment or the people you're working with?
Yes and no. I agree with everyone with what they just said. You absolutely have to watch how you say things, especially when we meet in person, how you're being perceived. I'm a big guy, I'm tall. So right away, there are certain perceptions that go around that. So I have to be very careful how I reply to certain things, because what I may view as passion may come up as being arrogant or militant. So folks are very quick to put labels on you. Like I said, when they do certain things, you're being very passionate about your work. He's very involved in it. We do that, then it could be perceived a different way. So yes, I've seen that a lot. How you get over that is continue to be yourself, who you are. Let your results speak for themselves. And I find it also, if you're in the room and you're one of a very few African Americans, make sure you stick together. All right, because a lot of times questions, especially in the technical world, I was also in that world a little bit. Questions are going to be asked of you that they already know the answer to, but they want to see if you know the answer, because that's how respect is gained, right? Once you come off, they're not going to respect you once they ask you certain questions, and you come off and you don't know the answer to that question. It's okay to say that you don't know. It's not okay to give an answer that's incorrect. So I find it always easier to say, if I didn't know something, I always said I didn't know, or I'll get back to you on that. Don't try to give an answer where you don't know. Because again, most of those folks in that room who are asking those questions already know, especially if you're the only one, or if you're one of few. When they ask those questions, they already know the answer to the question. They just want to see if you know. So always be yourself and be honest. First of all, to yourself.
And to the point of even, sticking together, and that's why I really like it. Insight Global has the Black Employee Experience Group, where we have our happy hours and stick together. And that's actually where I'm at tying. And I don't know what the opposite is of seasoned. If you're seasoned, Mark, tying's on the other end of that spectrum there. And in your experience, tying, what has it been like? What is your day-to-day different than others?
So for me, well, first and foremost, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate Insight Global for having me as well. So for me, I think the biggest piece about this would happen to be just setting the standard for people who follow behind you. So for me, I'm the only person of color in my office right now. So with that being said, I have to set the standard for anybody that follows up behind me, because now I'm that person that they're looking at. It's like, all right, well, if he's doing it correctly, then now we feel more comfortable bringing other people into it. And then you just have to understand, when they do bring other people into it, you just have to take them under your wing. Like, that's your responsibility, whether you like it or not. You have to bring them along with you and say, hey, this is how you're going to, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. You're already being watched as it is. Just try to follow my lead, basically, and we'll get there. So that's kind of the responsibility I've taken in life in general. Not even just with Insight Global, but just everything. Set the standard. So
that's a great way to think about it. That is actually, I love that. That's an excellent way to think about it. And what about you, Calvin? What things have you noticed?
Well, thanks, Ben, for having me, and I agree with everyone on the panel. I've been in management for about 10 years. And so the biggest thing for me is I didn't want to be labeled. I didn't want to fall in some, the stereotypes that Black people fall in. It was very important to me that, again, I had to watch what I say and how I say it. I remember an experience with another company that I worked for. And we had two colleagues, myself and the other colleague. We disagreed on a way something was handling. And both of us had the same points, but he was labeled as being passionate. I was labeled as being aggressive. And so early in my career, I learned that, hey, sometimes I just got to watch what I say, because sometimes we don't have a fair ground where we can express the way we feel. It can come off very wrong. So one of the things that I'm so mindful of is how I communicate, how I interact, because again, all the little things, you know, people are looking. I might have my head down, but it might be for a different reason. But then I get the question, hey, what's wrong with you, Calvin? Are you feeling a certain way? And so, you know, for Black people, you know, from my experience, I had to make sure that, one, I'm fine with myself. Two, I know what I'm going to endure once I come into work, and be able to communicate and don't fall in the trap of being, you know, labeled something, a Black man with an attitude, a Black woman with an attitude. But like someone said, just let your work speak for yourself. The other thing is, I don't feel like, I learned this over the years, is I don't have to defend myself. My work will defend me, you know? And so I just got to be true to myself and true to what I have been called to do as a delivery manager. You're paying me for this, and remember to do it excellent. And so the last thing is, I think everybody parent have, you know, on this panel have said this, you know, you cannot afford to do 100%. You got to do 120% for people to respect you, to recognize you. And so those are just some of the things that is different from my day-to-day than other colleagues that might be a different color.
Well, I will say this. My dad was a math professor. He wouldn't have gotten away with saying 120%. He'd be like, no, son, there's 100%. There's no such thing as 120%. But I think the sentiment definitely got passed down from generation to generation. But we're here to talk about, so let's dig into that. Understanding that, I think, will help us understand, you know, why Black History Month is so important. And so I want to start with you, Mark. Why is Black History Month so important to our society? And why is it also important that it is also celebrated in the workplace?
It's extremely important. One, it helps us understand where we've come from. It helps others that we talk to in the workplace understand what contributions and things that we played to society, which a lot of them, quite frankly, don't get. They don't know who certainly African Americans were, who were instrumental in medicine or science or various sports figures. A lot of them may know that, but on the other ends or technical aspects, right, of what our contributions were in other areas, they don't know that. So it's important for us, one, for us to know that, and it's important also for us in a non-intimidating way to let others know how important it is or why certain feelings are felt a certain way. I mentioned earlier that the series Roots was on over the weekend. As an African-American male in 1977 at 14 years old, that was the first time I got to see what the Black experience was like coming from Africa, the travels here, and how we were treated as a people here in the United States, right? America got to see that because that was the first time really America we heard about it, we were taught about it, but we never saw it. Alex Haley brought that to life for us in 1977. So even having discussions like that before could have been a little difficult. It's a little easier now, just to show why certain attitudes might be, or why is it important to have a Black Lives Matter group? Well, it's important that we keep the eyes on social injustices and social inequalities. That's why it's important. It's important that we show that, you know, we don't think our lives are any better than anyone. We just feel that we should be treated as equal as everyone. That's where the conflict comes in, and explain that in a very succinct way, in a non-threatening way, and in a non-threatening environment. So I think it's very important that we embrace our own history and that we have no problem sharing that with others who don't look like us.
I agree. And I think this is a very important, given the events of 2020, this is a very important Black History Month because, like you said, there are a lot of eyes, right? Just about every athlete is wearing some sort of social justice message on the back of their shirt. And so there's a lot of conversations like the one we're having today being had. And I think that's great, right? And I do agree that I think it's important to have those conversations in the workplace too, to make sure people understand what other things are we seeing, in the workplace. Marquise, for instance, what are some of the things that you're seeing that make it important to celebrate Black History Month in the workplace?
Yeah, when I think about Black history, then I think about American history, right? And when I really think about who it's for, yes, it's for Black people, but honestly, it's for everyone else in society. It's for everyone else in society to understand the Black capabilities, to understand our legacy and how we came to help form this country. We live the Black experience every day. So I know what it is. I know what we've been through, and I've chosen to educate myself to understand more. But for me in the workplace, it's important to have Black history present so our other coworkers who we work with every day can understand why as Black professionals we have come this far, who are the people who came before us to help us establish our mark, not only in the workplace, but in society. And so for me, it's important for people just to understand our accomplishments overall.
How do you feel, Tyan?
Same sentiments, honestly. So for me, walking into it, for me, I'm going to be honest. I extremely dislike that we only have a month. I feel like, I mean, like what Marquis said, Black history is American history. Our history should be established and littered through every textbook, just like white American history is. Like that should be a commonality throughout everything. Kids should be getting educated on it every single day instead of just, or every week, or every chapter instead of one one month. And then it shouldn't just be the slavery, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Rosa Parks. There are so many other people who have come before them and who have come after them that have established so many great things that most kids don't learn about. And I think that's where everything could be changed if we focus and hound on the fact that there's more to educate than those three main things that we like to highlight. There's nothing wrong with those three main things, but there's so much more. So
Right, and I know that that's something that me personally have taken up here at Insight Global, is making sure to educate people on the things that you're not going to learn growing up. Not Martin Luther King, not Malcolm X. And if you guys can see on the board behind me, I have James Baldwin's name written down, and that's intentional. So that was on meetings with people today. They're going to see that name and go, "Is that his cousin? Now let me go look that up." And they're going to go look that up. But what are some other things you're seeing at Insight Global there, Winter?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I feel like Black history is so important because, like Mark and Marquis said, that it is just kind of that month and that time where it makes it a lot easier to have those very important conversations. It's Black History Month, and I don't know about anyone else, but I might say something, that can come off as shocking, or maybe it's a Black fact, and then I follow it up with, "Well, it's Black History Month." It's easier to like talk about these things in a corporate setting. I feel like because we have this month kind of to back us up and just to offer a kind of another perspective to it. I think we can all agree that to be Black is to have this like sense of pride. And for me personally, I grew up not really understanding or like liking who I was as a Black woman. And it wasn't really until I started paying attention to these stories that I like heard in Black History Month that I actually had that like confidence to have pride, because I was actually learning about who and where I came from. And having this type of month and this atmosphere and just like the celebrated culture really, really helped someone like me who maybe, didn't have that like strong sense of pride. It was understanding and actually learning because it was put in front of me to like learn about it, was to like actually invoke that pride within me and then become more confident because I'm learning the stories. I'm learning about how awesome our people are. And now I get to share these stories and I get to be proud about who I am. And it gives me that confidence and that, everything I need. So I think Black history is so important just for that perspective of other Black people who may struggle with that whole like, well, why should I be proud about this? Well, here's why, because we have an amazing history. And I am so thankful for having just a month dedicated to learning about that. And it's actually very like personal time for me that I wouldn't be who I am today without like being forced to like learn about these stories because I didn't get to hear them in my history books. So I am very thankful for Black history and having that open conversation because of Black history. So.
And
If
go
I
ahead,
can,
Ron.
yeah, going back to what Mark said, you can't know American history if you don't know Black history. If you don't know about the experience of Africans who were brought to this country, then you don't know, American history. And one of the things I always say to folks, because folks think about, is it still relevant today? Well, I say, guess what? For most of the Black folks that I guarantee you that 90%, when you look at their last name, their name is the name of a slaveholder. It is
Yes,
not
sir.
linked back
Yes, sir.
to the indigenous culture or the continent of Africa. So slavery, yes, still exists, and the impact is still here in 2021. And it speaks to what Winter was talking about in terms of how we are taught through school. We learn about, MLK, you learn about slavery. I'm a little bit older, so hopefully now they're learning about the Obamas. But other than that, there's a rich history that's lost, and you don't know the whole story based on that. And you've missed probably more than 75% of the contributions that Africans in America or Black Americans have made to making America what it is today.
I agree.
Yeah, I wanted to
go ahead. Sorry,
Ben. Just the word that he said was contributions. And since we had our last discussion, our initial discussion, that's something I wanted to focus on because to Winter's point, when you take and we grow our confidence and we develop our pride, and now we have that in ourselves through our own individual and professional development. And we know that history, now we have to infuse that or integrate that into the workforce. And that's some of the challenges that I have. So we can be prideful in self, but I think to Winter's point, when you're discovering how to develop your identity based off of your history, you realize when you're integrated into corporate America, you have that duality. And that duality is something that, I don't know. I think we can all probably recognize that. I went to what do they call it? I forget the acronym for it or whatever, or the abbreviation, but I went to a private liberal arts institution, majority white. So the opposite of a HBCU. And of course, thank you, PWI, private white institution, or is that what PWI stands for, right? Okay, so predominantly white. Thank you. So I went to a predominantly white institution. Just a little backstory. So when I was 18 and trying to go into college, of course, Howard was at, one of my top lists, or Spelman, being raised in Georgia. And then my mom, to the point, not to shade her in any way, she was just like, look at corporate America and look at the understanding. Do you want something that I've already taught you in your actual upbringing to learn and infuse that into your actual, curriculum? Which obviously she's lessening the value of me learning it at the undergrad level, or do you want to learn the business acumen and learn the way that, quote unquote, the majority of America, which is at that time, majority white America, who can give you the promotions, who actually reviews your resume, do you want to do it their way? And so, there were other factors that contributed to me going to a PWI. The institution that I went to was a beautiful college, but I ended up going to PWI, and that's something I always look at. On my campus, we had to, if we wanted to pledge, we had to go to a satellite campus in the city of Chicago. And it's like, who wants to drive an hour and a half, to go and pledge, so there's a lot of inconveniences that I experienced with that. But in that point, me bringing up the fact that I went to a PWI is the fact that I had that duality from start to even now, And one of the questions that I just wanted to ask the group was, do you guys, what kind of value tenets do you guys see beyond just being a diversity hire, or beyond just being a diversity blimp or statistic for a PWI or a majority white institution, And the second caveat to that is really just, do you guys actually face a comfortability period with integrating into corporations? I know that I do. For instance, I always joke with my bosses or any, the hiring person that sends me the offer. I'm like, okay, I really don't open up at work just from a Black experience standpoint. it takes me like a year and a half. And I won't say I'm reserved outside of work related tasks kind of intentionally, because I am always super aware of that duality. So I know I hit you guys with a lot, but it was a lot of you guys talking on some things that I just, kind of to summarize it just for myself is just, what are some ways that you guys see us all being something a little bit over, it may not be said from, and maybe Winter could speak to this from a recruiting standpoint, like, hey, you're definitely a diversity hire. But when you get there, you do feel that existence, like, hey, I'm 1 out of 10 for a specific department, or I may be the only Black female in this department or on this team. And so I know that's something that we all probably feel just in corporate America, unless we wanted to be in a predominantly Black area that has a lot of us at a company. But I threw a lot at you guys. Feel free to ask me to re-clarify,
So I like that. I like somebody asking me a question. That's going to be good. I'll field this one because I won't be fielding a lot of questions today. But I went to a PWI as well. I went to Georgia Tech. Right. And to be honest, I went to Georgia Tech for the education. The diversity, or the lack thereof, really never dawned on me until I got there. And I lived on a floor with 90 people and I was the only Black guy. And even after I looked around and realized I'm the only Black guy, I was still like, well, I'm here for the education. I'm not, that still didn't concern me. And it didn't really hit me until the first person on my floor said to me, "You're the first Black person I met." And my mind blew wide open. You telling me you made it 17 years, 18 years in life, and you've never met a Black person, right? And the part of you wanted to get anger, like, this guy is. But I realized he's not being mean. He's actually being very honest, and he's being very vulnerable in this moment and saying, "Listen, I don't know. Am I supposed to treat you different? I've never met a Black person. I don't know how that is." And that really opened my eyes to, that diversity is very important. And I grew up in Lansing, Michigan. Oddly enough, is actually very diverse. My high school was very diverse, and it was never really that big of a thing. And then I came here to Georgia Tech and it was like, whoa, okay, it's definitely a thing and it needs to be talked about. And it was definitely something I felt like I had to overcome. And it even came to my attention that me being Black might have been why I got in. Georgia Tech needs a certain number of African-American out-of-state students. And I had really good grades in high school. And so my brother just at Thanksgiving this past year asked me, do you think that's why you got into Georgia Tech? And I told him, and I'd be honest with you guys too, I said, I don't care. I got in, right? Why, if my Blackness was why I got in, that's fine. It's what I did with it once I got there. To me, that was the more important part. Was, all right, I might be that diversity hire, I might be that token hire, I might be that quota hire, but what am I going to do with it, right? I've been given an opportunity. What are you going to do with it? And so that's kind of my take on your question.
Okay, and the second part to you guys, since we have a lot of vets and insightful people on the call, what kind of value do you guys see, to Ben's point, beyond being, quote unquote diversity hire, even if it's said or understated or not? What is some value based off our culture that we actually bring into the company? And then that's all I'm gonna ask you guys.
Go ahead, Mark.
First of all, Anna, I think you need to know we need to know our own worth. Right? I never had anyone else dictate to me what my worth was. So I learned that very early on. When I went to the office when I first went into corporate America, I was one of very few. Out of 100, there might have been 10, maybe 10 of us, maybe. Nobody was in management, was African-American, was a person of color. So early on, and I think, let me just step back. It's easier for African-Americans to assimilate to them than it is for them to assimilate to us. We have no choice, especially in corporate America. You have to assimilate, right? If you're going to be successful in corporate America, you have to assimilate, right? We're all brought you're all brought from good parents. We all know how to eat, right? We know eat with our hands. We all know how to speak well, right? We all know how to act. So some of those things are given to us naturally, right? We just have a lot of that. We speak with a lot of passion. Usually we're very giving folks, right? We're very caring about others who work around us, whether they look like us or not. That's just a lot of who we are as a people, right? So when I looked at, I never considered myself, I knew I was, but I never looked at myself as being a diversity hire. I'm here because I deserve to be here. I worked very hard. I passed the tests, right? That was offered when I came there. I passed my management assessment, right? Just like everybody else had to do. And let me even go back on that. Many of them never had to do that. They got there because there was a lot of nepotism, right? They didn't have to pass. When I asked them that question, and I've had one say, well, how did you get it? I said, I passed a test like you. What test did you take? They never took a test. Never. Their assessment, so the rules 30 some odd years ago were a little, and I'm not gonna say they're different today because they're the same way. They might be a little hidden a little differently, but those same attitudes and things, trust me, exist today, right? Right away, folks want to know, well, how did you get here? I worked very hard. That's how I got here. Well, how did you get what you got? Because I worked very hard for that, right? And you can work very hard and not sell yourself out who you are as a person either. Always be who you are. And people will respect you a lot more for that. Be who you are, do a good job. Don't look that your color's gonna get you over because that'll get you so far until your results gonna have to kick in, right? Right. So your color might have got you there. You might have been a diversity hire, but you wait to the first line of your assessments and your things come in, when your results come in and they're well below, you'll be an X diversity hire. So main thing is to make sure that what you're doing, right, you stay focused on to whatever your task at hand are, be respectful to everybody, and know you. Don't have anybody else define who you are. You define, Anna defines who Anna is, not them.
Well, to your point, Mark, and thank you so much. I felt like that was a brotherly hug right there. But to your point, we can say that, but the reality is, we still do have that duality because, as you said, we have to assimilate first. So we do have that comfortability to where we have to balance our worth as a Black or a potential diversity hire while we're trying to also assimilate. And so to your point, I definitely have my worth probably at the forefront of my mind, but like on a day-to-day, it definitely, I feel the pressure of assimilating. And so my own personal comfortability period is roughly about a year or so with the corporation before I can just fully assert my worth, because by then, to your point, annual reviews and performance management, you have that rap sheet, because a lot of you have mentioned on the call, we actually go through it double time with having our background, chin checked by colleagues, chin checked by whoever. So I kind of just wait to that annual period for my work to speak with me, and then I can kind of, breathe a little bit, waiting to excel. You know what I'm saying?
And Anna, you know what? Don't think that you're in the battle or you're in the war by yourself, because you're not.
Not at all.
Big mistake. A lot of us African Americans, we feel that, well, we might be the only one in the room, but you're not the only one part of the family, right? So look outside of that room, right? This is not the first time we've all been in a position where I've had many positions where I didn't feel comfortable at all. I'll be very honest with you. And know what I did? I went back to my network, right? And you go back to your circle, right? And you say your circle, look, I need help. And I got help. And I'll be very honest, a lot of times that help didn't look like me, right? It didn't have to be that help looked like me necessarily. I had a lot of mentors in my career that they weren't African, they weren't Black, right? Mm-hmm. So don't limit yourself to who your mentors can be, right? I think that's a mistake too we fall into, right? Especially like you said, you're trying to assimilate, right? So then you look at ones where you might have something in common with or something, and you can learn from anybody, right? They could be younger, older. I've learned from a lot of people who were 3-4 levels lower than me, and I learned a great deal. They were the main ones who used to tell me off and tell me something straight about myself. You start getting a little high about yourself, guess who's bring you back down to earth? The folks that work under you. And that's whose respect. You get their respect, right? Your results, you'll see your results change drastically. But I guess I'm sorry, I'm going too far. Good. I'm sorry, buddy.
No, you're good. I was just going to ask, I wanted to see Jakelvin's experience with assimilating, and what has it been for him?
Well, yeah, it has. Well, before I even answer that, one of the things, Anna, that really helped me in my career, I had someone speak to me, and they said, Jakelvin, there's greatness in you. Because the way I was brought up, I didn't get that. I didn't know there was greatness in me. And so it kind of affected how I did my work. It kind of affected how my outlook on my job. And I used to think that, okay, man, they just got me in this position because of diversity. But when that person spoke that in my life, that changed my attitude. I started to understand that, hey, I have worth, and that I didn't get this job because of the color of my skin, but I got this job because of my actions and how I perform. And so, irregardless of sometimes the way it looks, I have to make sure that I am fine with me and I have everything it takes to do this job, and not only do this job, but do it at a level where it's high, it's excellent. And so that was very important for me when my colleague spoke into my life, because I didn't have that. And so now, just being in management for 10 years, there's days where I kind of question myself, because things are not going right. But then I have to get an anchor down on what really matters. There's greatness in me. It's not because of the color of my skin, but greatness in me because I know what to do. And it's greatness in me because I know how to treat people. It's greatness in me because I take this job at 100%. I'm doing what I can do the best that I know how. And at the end of the table, if I gave all my all, then that's the only thing that matters. I can't control how people see me, how people perceive me. I can't control that. But what I can control is how Calvin Laughinghouse think of himself. And so, again, those are the things that help me. Those are the things that keep me anchored as a black man being in leadership. And then also for Black history, that's why I think it's so important. I think everyone hit the point, because in our education system, Black history is not in there anymore. And so this is the only month that a lot of people just hear Black history. I know when I was growing up, Black History Month really means something. And now I'm just, I'm looking at this generation, and do it really mean the same thing that it mean during the 80s? There was a struggle even to get the MLK holiday. Does it mean the same thing? People came up with songs and talked about Black history. I don't see that anymore. And so that's why I think it's very important that we keep Black history alive, keep pushing it down to the generation, keep it in our workplace so other people can learn what Black people have brought to society. And those are the things that I think that's very important. Just my 2 cents. So,
thank you guys.
Thank you. That was great, and I think you touched on a lot of good things there too. And in talking about making sure that we celebrate Black history, we all celebrate it growing up, and making sure we celebrate it, in future generations is also really important. And I'm just curious, and you guys can bounce around, and whoever wants to answer, we'll start with you, Winter. I'd like to know what was Black history like in your household growing up. What was Black History Month like, I should say?
Yeah, Ron, did you want to make a point before I jump into this? Because I thought you mentioned something.
well, just quickly, in terms of the diversity hire, my career, I'm not, a member of the Inside Global team, but I'm in the nonprofit world. So in the nonprofit world, I would say it was slightly different, where I never felt like I was a diversity hire, because in the organizations I was a part of, the communities that we served were very diverse. But, there definitely was this sort of feeling that, board members and leadership may not have seen Ron Skeet past a certain point.
Yeah, that's very important. Visibility and how others perceive you is also very important. But yeah. Winter, just give us a brief on what was it like in your household when you guys celebrated Black History Month?
So I feel like I had a little bit of a unique take on this. A couple things. First off, my personal background with celebrating Black History Month. My mom I actually grew up in a biracial household. My mother is Black, my father is white. My mom did a great job by wanting us to always be aware of our Black history. So she actually enrolled us in an organization called Jack and Jill of America. And what that is just a national organization dedicated to bringing Black families together and always, celebrating and being always hyper aware of Black excellence and Black culture, and kind of just teaching you stuff all throughout the year. There was no such thing as just 1 month dedicated to it. So we, in my personal household, we never had, the month of February, like, let's, just talk only about Black history this 1 month. We always talked about it. So like when February came around, it was nothing different. And in Jack and Jill, they always exposed us to it. And then I almost just lost my train of thought there. What it was like just growing up, my other perspective is.
It's okay.
You're good.
It's okay. We can come back to it. I gotta start.
I'm so sorry. I was reading. I know we're recording.
I'm making a list of things I'm gonna have. I'm learning so much already.
Yeah,
Jack and Jill's of America, PWI, code switching.
I got so thrown off. Thank God.
I'm getting educated here today.
Ben, I think many of us would agree that we live that Black history experience every day. So focusing on it as a month, as Winter said, was not necessarily as important to us as it was outside of the home and the schools and things of that nature.
I agree, and my parents are much like yours, Winter. Black history was year round for us.
Yeah.
The amount of book reports that I had to write for my parents far outweighed the ones I was writing for school, and the random in things like, I don't know, I'm not trying to age myself here. I remember being a teenager when the movie X came out and Spike Lee's X came out, and we were not allowed. We were all excited to go see it, right? Denzel Washington, Spike Lee, yeah, we wanted to see it. We were not allowed to see it until we read the book. And there was a really embarrassing for my father. My father, who prided himself on teaching us Black history year round, I embarrassed him to no end. And we've been talking about roots. I actually met Alex Haley when I was 10 years old. We ran into Alex Haley at a restaurant, and my dad looked at Alex Haley, got really excited, looked at me and said, "Son, do you know who this is?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "This is Alex Haley. He wrote Roots." I said, "Oh. No, I don't know what that is." And floored. I mean, my dad gave me crap for that for years after that. And so Black history has been very important in our household. But again, we didn't wait till February to get it done. We did it done year round. And back to our seasoned, I want to talk to our seasoned panelists here. What about you, Mark? What is when you were young? What did those Black History Month celebrations look like?
Kind of the same as everyone else's. I was fortunate. My grandmother was one of 13, and she was responsible for having the family Bible. So the family Bible contained all of her relatives, her sisters, who they were married to, various children. My great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather was in that. So she was very, very pro learning about our own family history. So learning our own family history was paramount in our house. So, and she didn't just not wait till Black History Month. Got to remember, Black History Month only came about, 1970, 1976, if my memory serves me correctly. It was sometime during the 70s. So when I was younger, there was no Black history. So, but we had our own Black history in that it was talked about all year round. So it wasn't geared necessarily to a particular month, but it was something that we just grew up with as a norm.
And it's actually something I wanted to mention too, because I did do a little bit of history, and you're right, it was in the 70s. I can't remember the exact year, but prior to that, there was Black History Week, right? And so what actually ended up happening, because we get a lot of, oh my God, how did we get the shortest month? Well, what happened was we were given Black History Week, and I don't know why they picked a week in February, but it didn't really matter. A week is a week, right? And so when the law passed in order to expand it to a month, the week was already in February, so they just expanded it to the entire month of February.
If I'm not mistaken, Ben, I think it was actually January 2nd through sometime in February. And then when it became formalized, I think we got the month. So I think it was actually longer than that. I don't remember off the top of my head why, like you said, instead of January being chosen, February was a shorter month, like you said, of the year. But I thought it was actually longer than that. I could be wrong, but I think that's right. I think it was actually longer, sometime in January through February. And then February became the actual month.
I'm going to chime in here really quick, guys. So I was actually researching this as well, so I might have another view, but I think it was Woodson Carter who initially had Negro History Week, and he chose the second week of February because it was two prominent people in the U.S. I want to say Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. And then in the 1970s, whatever president was at that time, I can't recall. He made it a month. He made it a Black History Month, and I think Woodrow Carter, excuse me, he was a part of the African National Congress when he initially brought it over to America. So that's how he got started with the Negro History Week. Just wanted to chime in. I might be wrong, but
no, that sounds right. Yeah, it was a while ago when I looked it up. So that sounds about right. Yeah, it was Negro History Week. Then that eventually turned into Black History Month. Anybody else want to share some of their experiences with Black history growing up? Tyan, you just finished growing up, right? So it should be pretty fresh in your mind there.
That's a good joke. That was a good shot. I like that one. That was good. For me, I grew up in a single parent household, so my mom was always working, and my birthday's in February. So when it comes to celebrating Black History Month, it was kind of not necessarily on the back burner, but I kind of relied on the education system to teach me what I needed to know, which is kind of why I'm so passionate about everything I am now, because looking back at it, I didn't learn anything. Like I wasn't taught anything. I was taught the bare minimum basically. And now it kind of affected my life growing up, because when I went to VMI, I kind of had a moment of like code switching. I had to realize like, all right, well, I'm not like everybody else. I kind of grew up thinking that the world was just one way, and then I realized very quickly it was like, no, like you might think like these, you might think everybody's your allies, but not everybody is. Cling to the people who look like you, and cling to the people who've been through the same struggle with you, and that's kind of what got me through VMI. So yeah, for me, Black History Month, I've kind of tried to educate myself throughout the years in general. And I kind of just hit that realm about 4 years ago. So nice. It's been a while. It's been a ride.
What does that education look like for you, Anna?
Oh man, I had, and this is just because I love to joke and throw shade at my parents. I grew up, I was a grandma's goose, and I actually have older parents. Like my mom, for instance, didn't have me and my brother until she was in her mid to late 30s. And so, my folks come straight from the old school. I mean, just even the joke, a lot of my younger cousins don't know what a switch is, but I was raised in Georgia. I know what a switch is. Okay. So, so to that point, my mom was really big on things like assimilation, and this is how you do things, and impression management. This is how you look, and this is how you speak. Because even though we have this pride, we're greatness, Black girl magic, Black women are dope. Culture is maternal. You get it, from your mama and things of that nature. When we translated over into corporate America, she also had this, this very rigid way of, this is how you need to look, because a lot of what your career background is going to be able to afford you is going to be merely based on how you look to the majority. And so my upbringing did have that duality. It could have been because my mom is from Boston a little bit, and Illinois and California a little here, and then my father is more so in Georgia. But at the same point, considering, at a lot of the companies and corporations I worked for, I was the first Black female in management. I can't say that my mother was wrong in what she pushed me to do. The only thing that's suspect is what would have been like if I went to a HBCU versus a PWI. Like, I feel like, I don't know. I don't know. That's something I regret. but to that point, because it's more so that sisterhood. I think a lot of what I missed out on, But yeah, that was my background. I was raising my hand to ask Tyan the question that was on my mind when he said he pretty much kind of self-educated or really just self-educated himself, maybe with some of the cultural things, if I was understanding you right, Tane.
Yes, ma'am.
So to that point, I think about that a lot, and it's probably because, not to age myself, but I think because maybe a lot of, mid to late 80s babies, if I'm just throwing that out there, we have our generation did shift what being Black means in a lot of ways, because now the Black experience is being televised. Now we have shows like, Blackish, and we have, there's a ton of shows. Blackish is just one of my favorite, but to that point, I think that's a great reference, because in a lot of ways, our generation's experience with being in corporate America or being just out in public, we're rioting, you know what I'm saying? I actually got hired right when we had a Black Lives Matter riot in Chicago this past pandemic, where they basically tore up downtown area, and I think about that. My mom's always like, your generation got that fire. You guys got that passion. You guys aren't going for not having your voices heard. And then additionally, though, on a softer side, on a more public or social side, a lot of us have a diverse group of friends, possibly or most likely. You know what I'm saying? A lot of us just have exposure to a lot of different things. Like, for instance, if I look at my father and I look at me, I've tried sushi and he hasn't, just small cultural exposing things, not to throw my parents under the bus or be shady against them, but I think you guys get what I'm saying as far as just cultural exposure, and then our Blackness being expanded a bit. For instance, we're in the computer era. I don't know about you guys, but computers dropped when I was pretty much a teenager. So here I am playing The Sims, Carmen Sandiego, all this stuff on a $1,300 machine, from what's some of the hardware stores that closed, Office Max or whatever, that we really don't even have as brick and mortar stores anymore. But long story short, we're growing up in the age of technology, to where social media has expanded our Blackness, to where our group of, our generation made Blackness popular. You jump on TikTok, the dances that they're doing, we do that. We did that, Tootsie Roll, Stanky Leg, Bankhead Bounce, Butterfly, Crybaby, all that stuff.
All of it.
That's us. That's us. You know what I'm saying? And even to, even to the point, my mom's generation, it's for the culture, but a lot of pop culture is our culture. And what I would like to see, just to compare our social imprint to where we're going in corporate America, is I wish we were as popular in corporate America. I wish, and this is a question that I was waiting to ask Winter towards the end of the thing, is like, what does it look like for recruiting and hiring initiatives to see, pushing forth, let's hire more women, let's hire more Blacks, let's hire more Hispanics, Latinx people? Like, are we seeing that shift for recruiting and hiring at companies? Because I would like, just as well as our culture is kind of popular in the social realm, what if we started having that same kind of power in corporate America to diversify corporations and companies, like actually having our voice matter in corporate America? Because it's nice being popular on a social scale, but I still got to wake up day to day and assimilate and integrate, So
that's a really good question. I do want to come to that. I wanted to get Ron's perspective real quick on the Black History Month question before we moved into that, because that does go into the next thing we want to talk about.
Yeah, and I think it dovetails right with what Anna is saying, because representation matters, right? When we talk about our experience growing up in the traditional American educational system, you learn about everything. You learn about George Washington and chopping the cherry tree and all this great stuff, Susan B. Anthony. And we learn all the great things about non-people of color. So for Black History Month, why not? We get the opportunity to say, hey, we know all the great things about you. We want to tell you a lot of the great things about us that you may not have been taught, that you may not have understood, and show again how we have contributed and made this country every bit as great as it is through every war that we've been a part of. And yet instilled is the dichotomy of the fact that we still have to fight to tell the world that my life matters, that Black lives matter.
I think, and that's wildly interesting that you say that too, because I have a more of an acquaintance of mine who asked me that same question, about, what do I have to be on board with Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, just listen to it, man. Do Black lives matter? That's where we're at. Do they matter, right? And like, you're struggling. The fact that you're struggling, to me, to get on board with that isn't the statement. It's really more of a statement of American society and where we are now. And kind of to Anna's point, and I think we spend so much of our lives in our workplace that has to be, as an adult, that has to be where it starts, right? It has to start in the workplace because we spend so much time there. And so I think your question is very interesting, Anna. And I kind of want to piggyback on that question and say, what can what can corporations do safely to celebrate Black History Month, to help educate people in corporations on Black history, and how does that make an impact, on diversity in general, and as well as, making sure that we see diverse people in higher up positions in companies?
So
anybody can answer that one?
Can I start that one off?
Really Go ahead.
Fast? Yeah. I'll be quick. So for me, so when I first got interviewed, my second interview, I walked in and I was like, hey, like, first question on the table, like, what are you guys doing for diversity? That was my first question before I walked into or did anything, because I was coming from a school that was not diverse at all. I was coming from a school that was very PWI. I didn't feel like, comfortable in my nature. And my sales manager, he said, hey, like, we have this initiative going on. We have this going on, and I would love to get you connected with people. So that set the stage for what I've been doing for the last 6 months. Now I'm the regional diversity ambassador 6 months into my role, which is super unheard of and super rare. So to answer your question, Anna, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. We have a few external things coming out to help companies that we work with, boost their diversity. It's just like another way to build our business, in a sense, and open doors and get in front of these companies, of course, to make more money. We run on a capitalist state, but it is also going to provide opportunities for diverse hires, not even just Black or white or just like Asian or anything like that, but for women, LGBTQ, wherever you stand, there's a lot of ways to get into this. So yes, Insight Global is rolling with that. I'm super excited for that. I can't wait for that to really come out and take the take the
Sorry, I didn't
initiative.
mean to be weird, but I think
no, you're
great.
fine.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
but yeah, I did want to answer that question. Yes, ma'am. And then I don't know what the second question was, but yeah, I did want to answer that one.
I don't know. Well, Ben, I don't know if you asked the question, but I was asking Winter because she's specifically a recruiter. I really wanted to know what her day-to-day looks like. So let me just because as a hiring manager for a lot of my teams that I've had, I work directly with the recruiters or this, the senior. What are some of the titles they give? There's a lot of titles for what you guys do. The hiring teams are expansive, but they usually give IT a business partner to work with, and so Winter, to your point, you guys are screening resumes and you guys are doing these interviews, and even to myself, I'll ask a hiring person normally if I've already got a job offer, I'm in the final stages. I'll just be like, hey, I'm just curious, how many were like me, just so I know. And a lot of times, a lot of the, especially after the offer is accepted, they'll tell me like, you were the only woman of, 50 to 100 applicants. And so that's great, for the sake of diversity, but that puts in the frame mind of what did that recruiter feel? What did that hiring coordinator feel when they saw me? Did they feel extra pressure to, push me along the process, or just like what goes on in you guys' minds? Because you guys looking at resumes, you're actually talking to these people, getting to know them right before you bring them into a corporation or company. So I was just wondering, what are some thoughts you actually have, and do you have any personal passion or initiative yourself to make that a standpoint when you are fielding resumes and backgrounds?
Yeah, so Anna, I love that question because it kind of goes into, so just to tell you, every recruiter that works at Insight Global, we're kind of challenged with a question of like, what is your why you, for like what wakes you up every day and makes you passionate about your job? And I will say it's very personal to each person, but mine specifically is I've always wanted to be someone who gives a voice to oppressed people. So I do know in recruiting and job hunting, you're putting your resume out there and your name is probably going to be the first thing that is out there. That's the only thing you can tell from a resume. And, a lot of names out there you can, probably profile or assume just based on that. I'm always making a point to always uplift and go after those names that, may be overlooked because of the name on the resume, or we have a face-to-face meeting with every single person we recruit, and it's always very interesting to me when I am talking to a woman or a person of color in IT, especially. I always really want to get a full understanding of their background, their perspective and everything, because I'm already a little bit more passionate. I don't discriminate on talents at all, but me personally, I do have a personal agenda to uplift those people that maybe don't have that much of a fair or equal chance, Anna. But I will say that that's something that I personally, that is my YU for in my job. I can't say that for everyone. Everyone doesn't look like me, and everybody doesn't have that background or understanding of why this person specifically may need a little bit more help or representation or push. But that's kind of my take on it as a recruiter. And my call to action that I would have to, someone we may be doing business with is just always getting an understanding of what does their diversity look like within their company. So when I am recruiting these people, I'm able to kind of let them know what I am putting them into, just to have that seamless process there. That's just kind of my take on it.
Hey, can I add something to that? I think that's very important what you said, Winter. That's because that's what we call unconscious bias. And, so people can get overlooked by their names, like you said, they just fly that over. And I think IG leadership needs to make sure that, classes on diversity, unconscious bias, that those classes are available and push that out to all the leaders. So we have a good understanding, because sometimes we do things and we're not even aware of it. But that's my take on what leadership can do from a IG perspective, not only for internal leaders, but also consultants, because consultants themselves, we're representing the company as well, and we're dealing with clients. And so we got to make sure that we're not, having an unconscious bias, or we got to understand diversity. And so, those are the things I think IG leadership as well can make sure that we're having these trainings that can help break down these walls that certain leaders may have, and they don't know that they have. I know with the previous company that I came from, that was one of their big initiatives for their leaders. I mean, we went through all these different trainings, and when I took unconscious bias, I had my own bias against people that didn't look like me. I didn't even know. And so it helps break down those walls and those mindsets that we may have that we just don't even know. So just my point.
And I think, and there's a lot of talk on the internet right now and on Facebook and social media about the use of the phrase, "Oh, he speaks so well," or "he's so well spoken." And I had a situation that where a friend of mine said that to me, and and I joked, "Oh, I didn't know he was black," and she was like, and I was like, yeah. But it sparked a great conversation. I was like, I'm not mad. It's not, I know you don't mean that in a mean way. I know you're actually being very nice, but it's that unconscious bias, and but we all have it. Like you said, I have it. I didn't, there's certain situations like, oh, I'm having it about people who look like me. That's crazy. And so I think it's very interesting. And I think, and I've loved all this conversation today, and I think we've come away with a lot of great things, a lot of great points, a lot of things to talk about. But I want to give each of you guys an opportunity just to give me your final perspective on anything else that you want to let the people who are watching this know. And we'll start with you, Tyan. What is your final perspective?
So, final perspective for me, I would say, first and foremost, thank you guys for having me. I appreciate Insight Global even, being willing enough to have a conversation like this, because it is well needed. So, final perspectives for me, just 2 points. One, continue to be who you are, and continue to be unapologetically Black. Stand in it, thrive in it, because that's you. It's what makes you you. That's where you bring the most value into anything. And then 2, for the counterparts, our coworkers, stuff like that. Be open and be understanding to things that you don't know. Be willing to be a sponge. Everybody says when you walk into a position, be a sponge. Take notes, ask questions, learn. Do that as well with your fellow diverse counterparts. Like, be a sponge to them, like fully understand what it means to be, or try to understand what it means to be, who they are in this world, because it does get rough. So I do appreciate you guys.
Thank you. Ron?
Okay. I would go back to, and I want to talk a little bit about organizations too. I mean, hats off again to Insight Global. you folks are the prime example of what can happen and how companies can lead in this space. The new thing, if you see some of the information out there, is that how will companies bring people back to the workplace, right, post-pandemic? And the culture will be different. And things like this and perspectives really will help us to work together better as an organization. What I say is that, the challenge is, or the call to action is, we got to be serious about this, right? We have to, one, when a company wants to do something well, you invest in it, right? Then you associate resources in addition to that. So you add metrics to it as well to ensure that you're going to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. Through this process, I've learned about a company called PocStop. I don't know if you've heard about it as well. They help companies with diversity in media, and they actually, trying to be diverse, highlighted me in this Black History Month as somebody who wasn't a normal voice that would be heard or elevated in the public. And last but not least, most of I happen to work for the Salvation Army. And, as an organization, I was really happy to see how they stepped up, in the events of 2020, probably within 24 hours after the unfortunate case with George Floyd. They were one of the first ones to put out a message to say that this is unacceptable, to support the movement. They were a part of the march, and then started to put things in place, not only for, I sit on a diversity, equity, and inclusion task force, which is definitely something that companies should look into, but also diversifying not only voices, but also voices in leadership.
Thank you. Anna?
Hey, that sound like, for Chicago slang, you got some hitters on your team, Ron, because task force, that's
I love it.
I love that a lot. But no, the takeaway really that I would have, separate from the question that was pending, was just change is obviously induced from the inside out, and so I guess, we really do have the responsibility as we work on managing all of our feelings and thoughts in corporate America, is to make sure that the corporation continues to be aware. I don't know if you guys do the same, but I always join a diversity-based group. And not just my own, not just Black or women oriented or LGBTQ oriented. I do, I do the Pan and Asian group. I'll do the military group, whatever category that fits, just to stay aware myself. So we kind of just have to continue to foster that awareness and take it on the chin. I mean, we have to be our own individual cultures for getting our voices heard at companies, unfortunately. So.
Thank you. Marquise.
Absolutely, Anna. And to kind of go off of what you're saying, in the workplace, I think what's important for us is to continue to be uncomfortable. I remember my friend when she gave me a call, and she's a CEO of a nonprofit, and she was like, "Hey, Marquise, I got the credentials. I'm a doctor, but I really don't know the process." So I'm like, "Well, you know what? I did a business entrepreneurship. I might can help you." It was uncomfortable for me. I didn't know how I was going to be able to balance working at Insight Global, but also help a person manage and build up a nonprofit. But what I realized through that came growth, and that growth came with struggle. And I think we all can attest to every place we've been within our career, we've had to work a little bit harder. We've had to be a little bit, we have to go a little bit further than most people to really prove our worth. So, I want to leave with knowing that we're all going to continue moving forward, knowing our worth. But I also want people to come away from this call, and like Jakelvin said, being able to check their unconscious bias. We see it a lot in the workplace. We see how other people may say something, but because we have other things we're doing, we kind of let it go to the wayside. I know one thing for me is when I ever hear any sort of thing that may come off a little bit biased, or anything that may come off a little bit bigot, I'm going to stop whatever I'm doing. I'm going to address it right there, because if you let that go unchecked, that continues to spread throughout the workplace. So really just wanting people to be able to check that unconscious bias, and not only just in terms of our societal interactions, but also regarding the workplace. And I do apologize, my lawn keeping guys are outside. So I'll just wrap it up here and just say that, continue pushing forward and just being uncomfortable.
All right. Thank you, Marquise. Jakelvin?
Well, Ben, I want to say thank you for having me. But my perspective on this was, one, yesterday I was just looking at IG's purpose statement. And our CEO said, basically, he wants to develop people personally, professionally, and financially, and then send them out where they can be a light, in the world. So having this platform discussing these things about Black history, I think that falls under that personal development. It's very key that we all know not only Black history, but all of the people history, Asian American, Hispanic American, so we can understand their culture, so we can move all the boundaries that separate us, so we can be that great company. And I think this is a great step. I think we need to continue to have these sessions where we can talk, we can discuss things, and feel like we can come to the table and not be attacked because of some suggestions that we have to improve the company. So I think, hopefully the people that's listening get something out of what we share today, our perspectives, our past experience that can help them and just kind of make this company continue to grow and continue to be better.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you. Winter?
Yeah, again, thank you. Just like all the others said, this is so important and near and dear to my heart. Talking about diversity and inclusion openly and publicly was something that I struggled with a lot. So I want my main takeaway from this call to be that as hard as it can be, even for me and other Black people, like it is so important to just have these conversations and be open and be real about them. And my takeaway is, these are real as 2021 and microaggressions are still a thing. We are still facing oppressions every single day. It's a real thing. And that's why we are so impassioned to, take the time out and share these perspectives. And I just hope that everyone listening to this call, just takes it seriously, honestly, and I'm excited and open to answer any questions anyone may have, because I also want to, challenge myself, Marquise, to be that person that kind of addresses things right then and there. And I don't want to, be someone anymore who just, brushes it off, because obviously this is something that it's very important and needs to be changed. We can't just keep going every single day, brushing it off. So I'm so happy we're having this conversation, and they're important, and I want them to keep going as well.
Thank you, Winter. That's awesome. Last but definitely not least, Mark.
First of all, I want to say it was great being with all of you. I am totally appreciative of all of your perspectives that helped me. I think we had a gamut of different age groups and different perspectives. So it definitely helps me to grow personally. And I'll finish by saying this. I robbed a quote from Desmond Tutu. He said, "My humanity is bound in yours, for we can only be human together." So that goes into what Jakelvin was saying earlier. At the end of the day, we pull us together, but at the end of the day, we also have to live with everyone else around us. So we need to be very cognizant of that. Black history is not something to be afraid of. It is something to embrace, as Marquise and Ron and Ty, all of us have said the whole conversation, right? At the end of the day, Black history is American history. So that's the main thing we need to keep in mind. It's not something to be afraid of, it's something to embrace.
Thank you, Mark. And yes, in my final perspective, and all I want to say is that I agree with all of you guys, and it's great to have conversations like this, but I want to make sure people remember that there's no conversation too small. Whether you're talking about Black History Month or, what you had for lunch yesterday, no conversation is too small if you're getting to know somebody a little bit better, and especially when it comes to their culture. So keep conversations going and keep conversations alive. And I want to thank all of you guys for being here today. Like Mark said, this has been great. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have too. And I want to thank for you guys that are watching, and thank you guys for watching Perspectives. I hope you guys all learned something here today too. And we look forward to connecting with you next time.